will be go live. Will be going live in another 10 seconds. Simi ma'am, you will see
Hariom, there is
live
lot
streaming
of
on Facebook.
Hariom, there is a lot of echo from your side. Either you are using two nearby things, okay? So
I think we are live, right?
Yes, we are live.
Okay, we welcome you all to our very first session by Women Innovator VE Cell on career counseling. I would first like to invite the founder of Women Innovator, Tripti Singhal Somani, of KGS Advisors. Tripti embarked on this journey in 2014 and incubated Women Innovator, the very first incubator, virtual incubator for women to empower women professionals, social activists, entrepreneurs in their professional journeys. Today, we are a proud community of 10,000 men and women, abetting the journey of women across 20 plus countries, which also includes 2-tier, 3-tier, 4-tier cities, with the help of 190 influencers across 90 different sectors. And we have launched various initiatives, including Women Mark, a virtual marketplace which today has 1,000 plus products and services offered by women. Tripti has the courage, the vision to bring people across the globe together with one mission: we, not me. Over to you, Tripti, to hear about the journey.
thank you so much, Simi. Thank you so much for the introduction. And it's a pleasure to have Simi, you moderating, and Renuji will be speaking on a very important topic today, which is overseas education. I think every Indian student, it's unfortunate for us, but every Indian student I have come across, it's an exciting thing. I remember when I was in 10th, and my father used to show me the India Today magazine, although on the top 10 college it was Shri Ram, and I went to Shri Ram, but I always eyed to go to NSU, Singapore University, and I came to know about it at the end of like just 2 days before the application. I didn't know that you need to really prepare for it, being from Bareilly, a small town where maybe international education or importance is, or the experts are not there. At that time, we didn't have that kind of a virtual kind of an experience. You need to really be very well connected to have all these information with you. So I think that was the whole reason why I really wanted this particular session to be there for our student, for our people who are watching us Facebook Live today. And secondly, as Women Innovator founder, I think we really want all the aspirant, people who are really eyeing to be tune in with us, because after this session on 29, we are also will be discussing why abroad, why not in India, why you should know why, because today everyone, even a person like me, wants to go to Harvard and do MBA or PhD or something like that. But is it really relevant for someone like me? Is it really will add value? Unlike, of course, the alumni status and alumni network is one thing and can be achieved in different other ways. So all these things keep coming to our mind and we don't know how to resolve it. So over to you, Simi. Thank you once again for moderating our educational initiative, always in such a well-planned way. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Tripti. We now welcome Renu Mahindru, career counselor and coach, with a special focus on studying abroad. First and foremost, we would like to hear from you. So it will be nice to hear Renu talk about her journey, because it's very interesting. Renu, we would like you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Simi. And first and foremost, let me thank Tripti and the Women Innovators team for having me here. It is really a very prestigious platform for me. And thank you, Simi, for taking time out of your schedule. I know you're a very busy lady, and to doing this with me. So I really appreciate it. Okay, my journey was actually a typically, a middle-class family. That's the family that I came from. And I studied in the Convent of Jesus and Mary, Delhi. And then I had a very early marriage. I just about did my graduation, and then I had a very early marriage and early kids. So it was a typical middle class, what happens, college jao, college ke baad shadi, that kind of a status. But somewhere when I was in school, actually, I was given an opportunity to go abroad to California. This was when I was in grade 10. But somehow, coming from that kind of a family and being the only girl child, I knew my parents would never ever allow me to go abroad, So that sort of dream just died. But somewhere I think there was a flame that it lit a flame in me that I wanted to go abroad to study. But anyway, marriage came, after marriage, kids came, and then I did my first MBA. In our family, there has always been a lot of emphasis on education. So I did my first MBA after I had my second child, which was from Delhi. And then slowly that MBA was in HR. So I started off by being a management consultant, majoring in HR. And then slowly, I don't know how it happened, but I digressed into education. This was in the early 90s. And at that time, if you remember, there was no internet. And going abroad was, and what was not the choice, at least for not the undergraduate people. People generally thought about going abroad at a later time, when they went for their masters. But I was very keen, to send my own children. So my journey started in the early 90s looking for schools. And I used to go and spend time in the USCFI, taking down notes and, getting stuff about universities. So I digressed into education, and in 2002, I had the opportunity to go overseas. One of the universities that I was in close touch with actually invited me. So 2002, I went to US, and from 2002 to 2014, I was actually in the United States working in universities and doing international admissions. So this kind of became my niche. This became my ikigai. And I didn't realize that it was something that I was actually passionate about.
Wow. So pursuing something which is your passion and going ahead with it, and not only that, kind of counseling in it, I'm sure is a beautiful journey. Let me just give a precursor to the topic before we move to the Q&As, and I'm sure a lot of people want to ask a lot of things from Renu. The world is flat. Almost 15 years ago, Thomas Friedman had talked about trends in globalization. Globalization is here to stay, and students who want to work in our interconnected global world should study abroad. Ideally, making study abroad a part of our education system is the most effective and accessible way for students to develop the needful skills to work in a global workspace and to experience other cultures, languages, environment, education systems. Learning how to interact with people from other countries and cultures equips our future leaders in the MNCs to address business problems holistically. Recently, we had a session with Women Innovator on the new education policy, NEP, but I don't remember seeing an exchange program as a mandate. I think that should have really helped our students. But having said that, they did give us choices. The national education policy today gives us flexibility and choices. Now, my thing is that when we get flexibility and choices, do our higher education, and we will come down to that, offers those opportunities in India. Today, India is second only to China in the number of students flying abroad for an international degree. Aspiring for global education and experiences is a pull factor, but there's a huge push factor, and this is where probably we will address Tripti's concern, which has led to the exodus of our top talent to many international destinations for higher education. Student enrollment in global schools have reached peaks. Why is that so? Renu will probably help us understand. 50% of the Indian population is at an average age of 25 years. Cutoffs in universities and good business schools have touched 98 to 99%. As mentioned by Dr. Punya, Vice Chairman AICT, in one of our previous sessions with Women Innovator, a study at Stanford said that Indian students make substantial gains in mathematical critical thinking, but their overall higher order thinking skills are substantially low compared to their Chinese and Russian counterparts. Global universities are selling themselves to Indian students. The new post-study work visa, the PSW visa, announced by the UK government, will find more students looking at United Kingdom over the traditional country of choice, the US. The change in US policies has made countries like Canada and Australia more attractive to our students by easing the visa and the work permits. Another lesser known factor that probably takes Indian students abroad are courses that have no parallel in India. Offbeat courses like brewing and distillation courses by Heriot-Watt University, Scotland, or marine engineering or geophysics game design and development are some of the disciplines which are creating a strong interest in Indian students. And for parents in India, the students deciding on studying abroad, safety is paramount. Now, Renu, what I want to know is whether we work in US or we come back, returning to India with an international degree and work experience puts us in a stronger career trajectory. We shall now like to revert to you with our very first question. Why should we study abroad and how shall we go about it?
Simi, what you mentioned about the push factor, that is actually a very, very, very important point. Because I think we are actually pushing our students to go there because our students don't have the choices here that you mentioned. Now, if Delhi University, if you read yesterday's newspaper, it has closed its admission at 100%. St. Stephen's has closed its admission at 99.5. How ridiculous is that? What happens to the child who has 9% marks? What happens to the child who has 98% marks? Aren't you pushing him? You are pushing him to go to that country because the person, forget 99, what happens to the child who has 85% marks? He is not unintelligent by any standard, but he does not get into a program of his choice. He does not get into a school of his choice in India. So there you go. You are pushing him to go there. Point number one. The second point that you said about the resources available. Now, there are courses in which the kind of facilities and the kind of resources and the kind of labs that are available to them abroad or overseas is incomparable. In India, supposing a child is going in for, say, nanotechnology or mechatronics or, say, robotics or any of these courses, we don't have the resources available. We don't have the kind of labs that the child needs available. So the child will definitely, we are pushing him to go overseas. Point number three, our education system is totally focused on marks. It is only one vertical on which our children are assessed for admission, which is really not fair. Marks sometimes cannot be the only reflection of a child's capacity to learn. And admissions in these countries are very holistic. Now, besides marks, marks is one vertical. I agree, it's an important vertical. But you can't base the entire admission on just one vertical, right? The child, overseas admissions are holistic. They will look at your extracurricular, they will look at your community service, they will look at your letters of recommendation, they will look at the quality of your essays, and then make a decision. Now, how fair is that? There is a child, supposing, who fell sick in the final exams. And he's actually, and this happened with me. The child was a student who expected 98% marks, but he came down to 85. And he didn't get into any school here because that was the only vertical on which he was being assessed. Similarly, I have a student who is a state level or a national level swimmer. Delhi University will probably not consider him if he does not qualify under the marks category, even in the special quota. But foreign universities, they are willing to compromise because they have someone who's passionate about something else also other than. So that is another factor which pushes them there, that our admission system is not holistic.
But Renu, now with the new national education policy coming ahead, they are talking about flexibility and choices in career. They are talking about, convergence of extracurricular with curricular. That means you can pursue maths with physics. Do you think our higher education is ready for honoring credits and, even having further higher training programs in something like physics or in something like script writing in theater, in cinema, or something like we said, brewery and distillation? Is there readiness? Even if the national education policy says that offer these courses, firstly, are the schools ready? Are the higher education system ready? Is that there at all in our ecosystem? I mean, this actually brings me down to the second question actually, that do Indian graduates lack the international experience, language capability, and the cross-cultural communication skills necessary to succeed in a global economy like ours today?
Yes, I think they do lack because our curriculum doesn't have the breadth. You know, our curriculum, if you're going in, say, for a B-commerce degree in Delhi University, all you do is commerce and you come out of it. If you're going in for an engineering degree, all you do is engineering and come out of it. Now, the foreign curriculum is such that the child is able to actually amalgamate his passion or his hobbies along with his career path, which is so beautiful. You know, if you are doing, say, an undergraduate degree has 40 courses. So 25 courses are going to be related to your major.
Yeah.
The balance 25 courses, the university lets them, you know, put in whatever they like. Supposing he likes to play the guitar, he can take a guitar class and put it under his electives. So this is what the new education policy is actually trying to do, which is something very good because it's an amalgamation of your passion. Now, there is a university in Canada which offers you Bollywood dancing as a course.
Okay.
Now look at that. If a child is going for a BBA degree, but she loves to dance. So there you go. You take in a Bollywood dancing course and put it against an elective. Or you're going for a BBA program, but you are interested in programming. Or you said like game development. So what they let you do is they let you do your BBA as your core subject and take in 4 courses in programming. You can do a course in C++, you can do a course in Python and put it against your electives. So amalgamation हो गया ना? उधर से आपका passion, आपका career तो बन ही रहा है. And at the same time, you're taking care of your extra interests. So this is actually beautiful. And if our country can amalgamate this and bring this in the curriculum, why should a person doing science do pure sciences? Now, in these countries, part of the curriculum, you have to do a course in ethics. So look at the depth and breadth of their program. You have to do a course in psychology, even if you're doing engineering, because they say psychology is so important to any kind of trade you are in. Everybody has to do a course in computers. Everybody has to do a course in world history. Even if you're doing engineering, you have to do a course in psychology. So that is what the breadth of the curriculum is. And if we can get that here, and soft skills are taught there in the curriculum. Resume writing is taught in the curriculum. Personality development is taught in the curriculum. It's not taught in India. And now, so naturally our children are going to lack on that. You know, public speaking is not taught as part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
So soft skills have to be, and if the NEP is bringing it in, I think it's a very, very good thing. Something which is, you know, you need to really recommend the government for. I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. No, we have had a lot of discussions on NEP and we hope it's actually implemented in the full spirit.
Yeah.
So coming to my next question, what are the new and novel career choices that international education offers? Because the pandemic has actually put quite a few careers like in a mess, like hospitality, travel. Suddenly, nobody actually thought this would happen. So what are those future-proof career paths? You know, what is it that I must definitely do? Or should I kind of divide it in a bouquet of things so that, you know, I am not, I don't have a layoff?
Actually, for the last about 3 or 4 years, at least for girls, I've noticed that one career which is really coming up a lot, and a lot of girls want to go into it, is like psychology. It is getting to be a very, very hot program to go in for, because people feel that with artificial intelligence coming in and all, a lot of robots are going to take over jobs. So, you know, people feel that people will have psychological issues, and you will probably need psychologists at every road corner. So psychology is becoming a very popular program. And in fact, last year I had one girl come to me and who said she wanted to go in for criminal psychology.
Yeah.
You know, she wanted to know how a criminal's mind works. So these days, children are coming in with such beautiful options. You know, in our time, it was like STEM. STEM is still popular. I won't say that STEM will ever go down, and STEM is always going to be popular. But other than that, you have a lot of new fields, like actuarial sciences is catching up a lot. Then you have geophysics, like you mentioned, that is catching up a lot. Then in healthcare, there is a new line which has just come up. And in the pandemic, I think it is going to take up even more, which is called infection control.
Yes.
So this is something which is absolutely new, which is coming up. And mechatronics is also picking up very well, other than the the STEM degrees, of course, I think will always be popular because, you know, core, you cannot take students away from the core. So these are core sciences which come under STEM. So they will always be popular.
See, there is a whole discussion now going about therapists. You know, with pandemic, everybody being away from contact, social contact, society as we are, we anyway need that social contact. So definitely therapists would be in demand. And I would say, why girls? If boys should also get into therapy because should not be gender specific at all.
Absolutely.
So, you know, so having said that, which are the new desired destinations for Indian students? There's been a lot of churn by the US policies, so, you know, I mean, if I really give you generally a stats for the audience, 2019, over 2 lakh Indian students went to US for higher education. And in the same year, the OPT, what we call the optional practical training jobs, about 85,000 people applied for that. 70% of the H-1B visa goes to India. Now, having said, so with this entire new change in policy, at least there was a churn there, do you see US not as the most attractive destinations? Do you see people moving towards Canada or other destinations? Have you seen that trend among students now?
Actually, I have. Till about 10 years ago, you know, I was telling you I've been in the line for over 25 years. So 10 years ago, 80% of the students wanted to go to US, you know, and 20% were opting for other countries, which included Canada. Now, lately, in the last about 4 or 5 years, 80% of the students actually want to go to Canada, and 20% want to go to the US. And the other destinations have slowly actually died down. I'll give you the reasons why. US has always been a dream destination. Everybody wants to go to the Harvard or the Stanford. You know, we can't deny that. It's a brand by itself, right? So it'll always remain a brand. Now, there is one class of people who want to study and come back, who are very sure. They don't need the OPT, they don't need the H-1B, they don't need the path to the green card. Now, for example, say Ambani's kids, they had to come back because they have industries to take over, right? So for them, it doesn't matter, you know, whether there is an OPT or so. That class of people is still going towards the US, right? Because of the brand. It is a brand destination. And it's one of the most robust economies in the world that we cannot deny. Now, the second lot of people are the people, and I personally actually believe in this, that the country in which you study should give you an option to work for 2 reasons. One, you must have an ROI on the investment that your parents are making. And secondly, unless it's like theory and practical, you've done the theory bit, you've got the tools. Now, unless you use those tools in the same environment, I don't think it helps very much. So you must get the opportunity to work. Now, US does give you an OPT. For other categories, it's only 1 year. But for STEM graduates, it can go up to anything between 32 to 36 months. You know, and the journey beyond the STEM, you go from a OPT, you go to a H-1B, from an H-1B, you go to a green card. It is rocky. The journey is rocky. But I can tell you something, that the students that I sent about 10 years ago, everybody has got a green card. Kisi ko 2 saal lage honge, somebody might have taken 10 years to get it, but ultimately everybody has got a green card.
So anybody who's trying to go to US, all the parents who spend money for US, what is the mantra? You said all my students have got a green card. I'm sure everybody wants to know, what is the mantra to get a green card in US?
There is no mantra. It's just a time and it's a wait. And your sponsorship has to be from your employer. So even if you are getting a lower salary, I would say stick to a company, you know, which is going to petition for your green card. So it may take 6 years, 4 years, 5 years, depends on you. And you can be on an H-1B for actually 7 years. 3 years plus 3 years plus 1 year. So 7 years you can be on OPT. But the point is that you will always have that sword hanging, that in case you lose your job, you have to go back.
Yeah, but isn't India also an exciting destination? I mean, forget about India, China. I mean, China's people go back due to the language issue. See, the advantage we have, courtesy the British, is that they, you know, we have a language, we don't have a language barrier. When we go to Canada, UK, US, Australia, We are very, very comfortable. So we don't even feel that we've migrated to a different environment. And today's generation, the way they're exposed to the culture, Western culture, sitting here in India, I don't see there is any new surprises for them. But still, I would like to ask you that there has been a churn. The H-1B visas, there has been a churn by the government. Migration policies are changing. Has that impacted US? I'm talking about now, very, very recent, last few months, 6 months, 8 months. You feel a change? Because I've known parents who they're telling their children that even if it's a dream destination, wahan apply mat karo, wahan to kuch visa nahi milega. So is that?
Yes, it has impacted. I won't deny.
Canada is pulling.
Yes, it has impacted. And in fact, Canada has come up as a very, very popular and a preferred destination now. Because again, there are a lot of companies, like for example, even Bill Gates does a lot of his recruitment from a university like Waterloo. And Waterloo is considered as the counterpart of the MIT in USA. And the best thing about Canada is their social security system.
Yeah.
And the journey to a PR, the moment you finish your degree, in less than a year, you can have a Canadian PR in hand, which is one of the most attractive things to every student. Secondly, Canadian education is about 25% cheaper than US education.
Yes.
And some of the world's topmost, universities are now in Canada, and they come in the top 25 of the world. So Canada is becoming a very, very hot and really a preferred destination. Now, as far as UK is concerned, it has really dropped down, because till 2019, their policy was that you finish your degree today, 24 hours, you pack your bags and leave the country. Now, they started the new policy which says from 2020, they will allow you a 2-year work permit. But the point is, there are no jobs in UK.
Yes.
And after Brexit, the situation is even worse.
The stability of the economy itself is not there. So why would students? I absolutely agree with you.
So if I had to conclude, and other countries, like there are Germany, there's NUS, like Singapore, there's Hong Kong is coming up also. These countries all have a major problem, because once you finish, they just want your money for the tuition fee. Once your degree is over, you have to pack your bags and leave.
So apart from US, almost everybody, and now Canada, almost everybody says pack your bag and go.
Australia and New Zealand don't. Yeah. But then if you look at Australia, look at Australia's economy. Tell me one thing. Have we ever heard of any company, any multinational in India, which is from Australia? Except for Foster Beer, there is no Australian company. Now look at the US. You have Deloitte, you have Pricewaterhouse, you have Pepsi, you have Coca-Cola, you have Google, you have Microsoft, you have Amazon. They're all US-based companies. So US hot destination to hoega, jobs bhi wahan hai, economy bhi wahan ki boost hai. So Australia, nobody wants to go. What will you do there? They don't have any industry. So which makes Canada a very good choice, because there is a way to route. People generally go to Canada and then ultimately they work their way through into the US through the NAFTA policy. They have a NAFTA policy between US, Canada and Mexico, through which a Canadian citizen can actually work in the US. So that is what most people do. They go to Canada, they become citizens there, and then they work their way into the US. So a lot of people even use Canada as a routing actually to get into US.
So US is still, regardless, the most preferred destination.
It is, unfortunately.
And most of your time in US.
Trump or no Trump, we don't know what the fate is going to be in November. But actually, if you look at it, we are saying Trump has only gotten after the H-1B visas. Yeah. As far as OPT, and he's not done anything in the policy. He's not. Sirf H1 walon ki wives ko he stopped them from working. But otherwise, the 65 quota plus the 20,000 for postgraduate students, that is still the same. This was the policy even 10 years ago.
And do you think American citizens can have that kind of a caliber to provide them with the labor force, technical labor force, specialized labor force, which Indian and Chinese and other countries can?
I don't think so. Because I have, in my experience in the US, if I compared a local American student with a local Indian student, our children were much smarter. The kind of grounding that our children get in grade 12, Their
Oh.
children do nothing. उनका तो 12th standard में prom night होता है और yearbook बन रही है, and that's all they do. They don't have the kind of foundation that our children have. Chinese students are academically, every topper in every university was either Chinese or Indian. But the Chinese have a language problem. Our children speak fluently, our children are academically bright. Look at all the in multinationals, every multinational is being headed by an Indian.
Yeah.
So what does that speak of our children? So you just mentioned in this survey that he said that, Indian children lack. I don't actually agree very much with that theory, because our children are very smart. Why is not any company headed by a Chinese? Why are Indians heading every company? Our children are smarter.
And as Indians who were educated in India, like the schooling and probably even the undergrad, a couple of them happened in India.
Yeah, some of them undergrad happened in India, but the masters pretty much happened there for most of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I come to you. I want to ask a very controversial question, which everybody has done as parents. This is more for the parents. Why have students deferred their admission offers by a year? Is it advisable? Why has COVID led to a gap year, like a 1 year deferment? Does it make
I
sense?
don't know how many people you know that have deferred it. In my experience, only one child of mine from the last years has deferred. And every parent actually asked me that should we defer or should we not? And I told every parent that it's not a good idea to defer. Tell me one thing, it's a 4-year program that the child is going in for, which means 8 semesters. Nobody knew COVID was coming. Agar 8 semester online kar bhi lega child, so what's the big deal?
Yeah.
What's the big deal? And would you have sent your child, if it was my child and the university asked me that, okay, we are open, would you like to send your child? I would say no. I would much rather he do it in my, under me here at home, do it online. And they have a very beautiful online platform. It's not that the child is suffering if he's doing it online. They've been doing online for the last about 20 years. And the online platform is as good as a regular, brick and mortar classroom. So kya ho gaya? Your child is at least doing something. The children who have deferred, you know what they're doing? They can't go anywhere. They can't go to parties. They're going from one room to the other, and they're ending up with mental health problems.
Yes.
So it is really not a good idea to defer. At least the child is busy and they have so much work to do. Everything is on the net. So what? So I don't think deferring was a good idea. I did not, and none of my students deferred. They're all taking classes online.
Okay, now I come to almost a closing question, and of course you're free to go and advise students, and there can be a question in it. With the whole work from home culture and the emergence of gig workers, a lot of opportunities, job opportunities have opened up for our students across the globe. How do you think studying abroad will expose them to a global work culture and make them suitable for these global jobs in future?
Actually, having exposure to a different country and a culture, getting to know them, understanding their accent, it definitely helps. And if you have the opportunity of studying and coming back and taking up these gig jobs in your own country, nothing could be better.
Yeah.
You get paid US salaries and you're sitting in India and doing it. So I think it's the best of both worlds.
So do you think people will actually now not worry about the OPTs and think that, okay, fine, since work from remote is anyway a reality today, most of the US companies are hiring software engineers from India and expecting them to work from remote throughout.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of probably some organizations just going virtual, the new startups emerged in the last few months are all virtual startups.
Exactly.
So there is no physical space anyways.
Yeah, and they're all enjoying it actually. And this was happening for a long time. For the last about 10 years, this has been happening a lot in the US. Every company had people working from their own hometowns. They did not expect them to move. So the platform was made like that. The only thing is that India has now awakened to it. And actually, I think even Indians are enjoying this fact. The only thing is we have to actually establish a little bit of the mental culture. Because there I know if somebody is working from home, they are literally working from home. You know, my daughter-in-law works from home, and she, like 8 o'clock, she enters her office. And once she will get up in between for a cup of coffee. That's it. So work from home, we have to just inherit a little bit of that culture, you know. So if we are okay with it, I think it'll work very well. And that's the new world. We don't have a choice. We don't know how long COVID is going to last.
No,
So
COVID also, that just might be the new normal.
that may be the new norm, right? That you said it. You hit the nail on the head. So that could be the new normal now.
So we are over with our questionnaires. If there's anything else, Renu, that I have missed out, please feel free to share with the audience. And let's open also the floor to question and answers. So Renu, is there anything that we missed out in this discussion which you think is vital and you should share with us?
The only thing I would say that, you know, for parents who want their children to go in for the undergraduate degree, which is the bachelor's degree as they call it there, students have to know and be careful that your admission is not only based on your 12th final, which is the norm in India. You know, in our country, what children do is they work hard in the 10th because it's a board exam. Then in the 11th, they get complacent. And then in the 12th, okay, we'll work hard next year because next year we have a board exam. But by the time your 12th standard result comes out, it's too late for you. So foreign admissions are based on your 10th final, your 11th final, and your 12th interim. So guys, do well in your 11th final. All your scholarships are dependent on that. So do well on the 11th final, and every penny that you get as a scholarship is actually going to ease out. It'll be towards the family's finances. So do well in the 11th. It's very important.
I would also like to talk about what Tripti mentioned right in the beginning, and she's here also. I have heard that recently there's a whole lot of trend in tier 2, tier 3 cities where counseling has picked up in a very big way and education abroad is becoming very prominent trend. Is that true?
I think so.
It's no longer with the metros. It's no longer with the Ambanis.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is becoming increasingly affordable. See, you have every kind of university. United States had about 5,200 universities. And you have the Ivy Leagues on top, then you have the middle level, then you have the middle level, and then you have cheaper universities too. You know, people have this kind of a thing in them that overseas education is very expensive. If you look at it, it's not. So it is becoming increasingly affordable. For that matter, there are universities in Canada whose fee matches what probably Ashoka charges. Ashoka is not a very inexpensive university, you know. So they almost charge the same amount as Canadian universities. So people are thinking, and then you're getting quality education. So people don't mind, you know, and what you spend on education is actually, it's not what you're spending, it's an investment that you're making. You know, so if you have the affordability, you're giving your child a lot of resources which they are not going to get in India. So if you can afford it, go to the slightly lesser expensive universities, and there's a university for every child. If he's a 75%er, there's a university which will accept a 75%er. Not in Delhi, that you will not get into Delhi University with 75%. So that is why, and people are getting more aware of the fact, you know, it is getting more popular. So tier 2 universities, a lot of the children are going from there.
So Renuji, I just would like to post a very important question, because every time we are talking about sending students, not all students are getting into Delhi University. We have a higher, at my time it was 94 was the cutoff for SRCC, and I got into it, and then I didn't get my hostel because I didn't have 94.5%.
Oh my God.
And you know, so but there are you know, we've seen people coming from you know, abroad with very less marks, but they are now heading a lot of good companies. Like one of my friends just became BharatPe, you know, he's BharatPe CEO today. So I'm just saying that you know, somewhere I feel that the kind of exposure they're getting, the practical exposure or the curriculum exposure, is definitely making us a little different and have an advantage of people who are working MSRCC and chartered accountant, you know. So it would be really great to quickly talk about a point where why not just Harvard should be Indian student aim, Harvard or Stanford and Oxford? Because normally when you see these 5 universities and you say wahan nahi ho sakta, matlab ab kuch nahi hai. And secondly, what are the opportunity of getting grants and scholarship? What is, like, normally you feel that you need to be exceptionally well in your GMAT. Is that the case? Are there other factors which can get you these kind of scholarship? It would be really great to know that those aspects.
See, scholarships are available, and first and foremost, there is a university for every level. So everybody does not get into, because the acceptance rates in the Ivy Leagues is only 5 to 6%, you know. So it is actually very hard to get into those universities, but there is a university at every level, and they're all accredited universities. You know, there are 5,200 accredited universities and colleges in the US. So there is a match for everybody, and you have to go into a best fit university. If you have a low GMAT score, there is a university for you. It's not like that if you don't get into the Harvard, the Stanford, there's nothing you can do. You can. And even the middle level universities or the lower middle level universities, they all give you some kind of scholarships. But we have to agree that scholarships mostly are available for their own children, people who are taxpayers in that country. So if you think that you will get a full ride, it is actually very difficult unless the child is exceptional in something. So you cannot get a full ride, but you can get 20%, 30%. Itna mil jata hai most universities mein. And then there are some universities which have a work-study program. Like there's a very well-known university in Canada which is called Waterloo. Now Waterloo has a work-study program where one semester you work, one semester you study, one semester you work, one semester you study. So pretty much after about a year and a half, the child doesn't need to get any money from home. He can self-finance his studies. So there are a lot of programs like that. But if you expect that 100% scholarship, they don't give it to international students. You only get part scholarships, unless you're a very, very brilliant child and one of the, you know, really sought after students, then you can get a full ride.
You know, I've also had some concerns where students feel that if they apply for scholarship and they're not like right in the top bracket, then they might get rejected. So they're sometimes even apprehensive. Even if parents want them to apply, they say, no, this is my first choice. If I apply for a scholarship, is that true?
Yeah, that is true, because there are some schools, they are called need blind. You know, for example, Harvard is a need blind institution. If they like you, if they admit you, you don't have to worry about the fees. They take care of all your expenses, even if you're an international student. And on the other hand, Stanford is supposed to be, it's not need blind. So if you are getting into Stanford and you say that I will need help, financial help, you could be rejected. So the child is right.
Did you get this information, counselor?
Or it is actually available. If you research a lot, it's available on the websites. Okay. Things are very transparent these days. So it's really not rocket science. The only thing is we have it on our fingertips, and you will have to probe and go deeper and find out. That's the only difference. Otherwise, it's not rocket science. You can do it yourself.
So there's another question. My brother has pursued BTech and now is working in the MNC. Should he look at a master's program abroad? And what are the scholarship options? So if you answer, yeah.
I really propagate US education because I've been in that system, and I actually love that system for what it has, you know. So I would definitely say that he should go for a master's, because the resources in a master's program, the kind of resources he needs. See, for example, I'll give you, you know, what happens is if you're going in for an MTech degree or a, you know, master's degree, most of the professors, like in India, most of the professors are pure faculty, right? In these countries, most of the faculty members are actually from the industry.
Yeah.
So if you are going for an aviation degree, you will see that one of your professors is probably from Boeing, you know, or if you're going in for a master's in finance, you will see one of your professors actually from private equity or who sits on Wall Street. So you are exposed to the industry experience. Hamari country mein all the professors are pure faculty. Yeah. They have no connect with the industry.
No, in fact, yes, that's the whole gap which we have. When students graduate, the industry is not willing to accept them. So employability is on the rise. We
Right.
have a question from Mr. Anil.
Yeah.
Mr. Anil, please go ahead.
Yeah, Renu, thank you very much for putting across your case for overseas education. Well, first part of my question has already been answered about the financial assistance through scholarship. My other question is that the students who go on from a middle class family, are these university allowing the international students to work part-time?
Yes. Yes. In fact,
Yeah.
Canada is one country which allows you to work from day one because your work permit is part of your student visa. And when the session is on, you can work 20 hours a week legally. You can work in the campus. You can even work off campus. And during the summer break, every university has a 4-month summer break. You can work 40 hours a week in the summer break. And the minimum wage today in Canada is about $18 an hour. So if you calculate $18 an hour into 40 hours, the child is very easily able to earn his fees for the next semester. So Waterloo does that. Waterloo actually allows you to work one semester, study one semester. So in the 4-month period that you're working, it is very easy to earn your tuition fees for the next semester. US also allows you to work 20 hours, but in the summer, it's very difficult to get a 4-month job in the summer. Job opportunities are less in the US now, but you are allowed to work.
Good, thank you. Thank you, good to know that. Thank you.
We have a question from Shifali. Shifali, would you like to ask directly or do you want me to read it out? Shifali? If you can unmute Shifali, oh. Otherwise, I can read her question. Okay. Shifali, are you there? I'll read Shifali's question. My daughter is pursuing business finance, BFI, I'm guessing that's from the University of Delhi. Should she go for a master's program abroad or straight away for an MBA?
Okay. Now, first and foremost, is she doing a 3-year degree or a 4-year degree? Because that can be a handicap in a lot of master's program in the US, because some universities will specify on their website that we need a 4-year undergraduate degree. For example, Berkeley.
3 years.
No, a 4-year. Some universities will specify that if you want to go in for an MBA or a master's degree, you must have a 4-year bachelor's degree. And for example, Berkeley, where your son is, if you see the Berkeley website, it says categorically 4-year bachelor's university degree required. If you look at the Harvard website, it will say a 4-year bachelor's or equivalent. Now they play on the word equivalent. So even if you have a 3-year bachelor's degree from, say, a SRCC or a Stephens in Delhi, you can apply, right? But don't forget that you have to cherry pick which university is accepting a 3-year degree and which university is not accepting. If you write to the university that I have a 3-year degree, should I apply? No university tells you not to apply. They'll say, please do. They want to increase the applicant pool so that they can maintain that, you know, we only take 5% students. Their acceptance rate is 5.6%, Harvard, but they want you to apply. So they'll tell you, yes, you can apply if you have something else in your profile, and they do take you. It's not that they don't. I know a couple of students who have gotten to Harvard with a 3-year degree, but excellent GMAT to counterbalance the 3-year and excellent work experience in a company like Pricewaterhouse or Deloitte. If you have about 7 to 8 years of work experience, and don't forget the average age for an MBA or a master's degree, MBA specifically, is 27, 28. So to answer Shifali's question, we have to see what the child's interest is in. If your daughter, what does she want? If she wants to go into pure finance, then let her do a master's in finance. And then for that, you don't even need to have work experience. You can go straight from one degree to the other. But if her interest is going into general management, then I would suggest that she work for 2-3 years, because without work experience, you cannot get into a good MBA school. You must have a minimum of 4 years work experience, a good GMAT score, along with a 3-year degree to be actually eligible to apply.
Shifali, does that answer your question? We currently have no more questions. Tripti, over to you then.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Renuji and Simi, for taking up such a wonderful session today with us and for our audience. Thank you, Pramod sir also joined. Thank you so much. This is few basic things like this, if can be resolved through our session, what else can we say? I mean, this is really helpful, and I'm sure we can add more of such session shortly for everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you for giving me this platform. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.